You will lose someone you can't live without, and your heart will be badly broken. And the bad news is that you never completely get over the loss of your beloved. But this is also the good news. They live forever in your broken heart that doesn't seal back up. And you come through. It's like having a broken leg that never heals perfectly, that still hurts when the weather gets cold, but you learn to dance with the limp. Anne Lamott. Bending, Not Breaking. The Dragon Pod. Reflections. Welcome back to another episode of the Dragon Pod. This is Ben Pruitt, your host, and we are talking about a really cool story today. I am thrilled to be talking about All Storms End. All Storms End, but guess what? I have a guest. And we have had a lot of really fun guests to talk about these reflections, and this person is just as exciting. So let me introduce you to Hailey. Hailey uses she, her pronouns and enjoys watching all kinds of animated TV shows, loves to read, try new foods, a big thrifter, and is a creator. And they have lots of content that they share and has a YouTube channel, Cartoon Universe, and is co-host of the Hot Brown Morning Potion podcast. Hailey, I am so glad you are here. Welcome to the Dragon Pod. How are you today?
Good, I'm good. Thank you so much for inviting me to the podcast. And I've been, it's been a hot summer, so I've been trying to cool down as much as possible, but overall, I've been doing good.
What is your preferred cool down method of choice? Do you have a go-to method?
Just the fan right in front of my face.
Just a big old right in the face. Yeah, yep. I totally get that. Mine is I end up after I go like on a long walk with my dog and I'm sweating, and I literally just lay down on my hardwood floor, which is usually a little bit colder than the carpet or the couch, with the ceiling fan, and I just let the air move. Oh man, it's hot this summer. I'm not I am over it. That's all I'm saying.
Same. Yeah.
Okay, it's moving right along. It's moving right along. So the fan is the thing to cool off, but just tell us a little bit about makes you you. We learned a little bit from your bio, but just like what makes you human? What makes you a human being that does things in the world?
Well, for me in particular, I just love a lot of different things. I'm always passionate about something new every couple weeks, if not months. And you'll see me jumping from one show to the next. But, Dragon Prince always will have a special place in my heart. But yeah, so I'm always checking out something new, if that means a show or food or a book. Yeah, that's kind of my thing.
Do you have, so you're jumping from new things, which is awesome, but do you have a genre, or you said animated shows in particular, but like what's the genre of reading and what's the genre of animation that you prefer?
Yeah. Well, for me, since with my YouTube channel, I'll pretty much check out any Western animated show that has some sort of, serialized storyline to it. So the genres vary so much, and because there's really just not that much out there compared to like anime at the moment. So I'll check out pretty much anything there, but especially when it comes to there are a lot more books to choose from. I gravitate towards fantasy and sci-fi for sure.
Definitely love the fantasy. For me, I tend to like, for some reason sci-fi is less interesting to me. I don't know why, but I definitely go hard on the fantasy. Amazing. Well, cool. And like, so you've been cooling off this summer. It's not hard to heat up, but are there things that you're doing outside that are interesting for you, that are perhaps warming you up faster than other things?
I was gonna mention that, yeah, I've been trying to be more active in general. So yeah, because I'm very much a homebody person. I could be inside most of the day. Though, yeah, since I work from home now, I do want to get outside a lot. So I've tried hiking and all that. So, that stuff that a lot of people like to do. So that's that. But like every weekend I'll go look at garage sales and stuff. That's just kind of my thing, to go out, get some sun, do some walking around neighborhoods. Yeah, I find that really fun.
Creating excuses to get outside. I struggle with that during the school year. I'm still in grad school, so I have this is my last year. I have 9 months. It's not that I'm counting, but like I am ready to be done. And it's sometimes difficult to remember, like, oh, I haven't been outside in weeks. Like I should do something. So I'm happy that you're attempting at least to rock climb and do those things, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, cool.
Yeah. No, I mean, I kind of miss school in some ways because it was more structured about like, oh, you do get a break. Like I kind of miss that. Fair. So maybe you'll miss it when you're done, but I mean, you've probably been doing school for a while, so I understand if you want to be done.
Yeah, I think it's always going to be a grass is greener on the other side's kind of a situation where there are 100% things I'm going to miss, but there are also going to be a lot of things that I do not miss. So 6 one way, half a dozen the other, I guess. But yeah, okay. So, let's hone in a little bit. We're going to hone in on the Dragon Prince now. And I know that you said that this show in particular has a special place in your heart. And I'm curious why the Dragon Prince? What is it about the Dragon Prince that is so intriguing for you?
Well, I'm a huge fan of anything. I know it's like a big thing of this as being human, but I am a big fan of things that are not human, specifically dragons. So when I saw a show with the name Dragon, that had dragon title, I was like, ooh, I am very interested in this, because I've just always loved anything like dragons. And yeah, so I've been a fan of it since we got the first teaser poster of our main characters. And like I said, the name intrigued me. And the fact that it was a brand new studio making this that I'd never heard of, that's like, oh, they came out of nowhere. Like that is a very rare thing in Western animation to see. Usually there is like some huge name attached to it. But for Wonderstorm, there wasn't. So me being me and having a YouTube channel that I've been wanting to grow and make new connections, I reached out to Wonderstorm and I was able to form a relationship with the creators, and I've done a lot of stuff with them because I'm lucky enough to live in Southern California, which is where they're based as well. So that really helped, and I've met them many times, and most recently at this year's San Diego Comic-Con, I was on the panel, which was amazing, and it was a huge event. To anyone that was there or remembers, they released the season right then, so that was the new season right then.
Yeah. That was a wild drop. I'm not lying.
Yeah, it was hard to hold that surprise in.
Yeah, no, that was intense. I was not able to attend. I have not been able to go to a San Diego. I haven't been able to go to a Comic-Con, to be fair. And so, but specifically San Diego, of all of them, I have not been able to attend. And so it's just wild to come home and all of a sudden Twitter's blowing up and you're like, oh, this just happened. Wow. Yeah. So that was a really cool experience. So it's amazing that you kind of, the creators like Justin and Aaron are really, really cool people that have they're very generous with their time, it feels like. And then I've had that experience also with most of the voice actors and actresses who are doing incredible work on the show, and just everybody's so generous with their time and willing to be a part of the kind of things that you were doing, which is so exciting. So what a cool experience to have been able to kind of be alongside them to the point where you're on the panel. That's awesome.
Right. Yeah. Aaron's the best, and it was his idea and all that. It's like, really, me? Are you sure? Like, that's crazy. I'm just a little, just a fan like everyone else, but he knows I've done a lot for the show, I guess, because we've done like a lot of videos on it. Yeah. So I guess he wanted to say thank you for that, but it's still amazing that it happened.
Yeah, it really is. Wow. Well, cool. Let's use all of that experience and knowledge that you have, and let's start to focus in on this this story that we are able to talk about and all storms in. And I want to pause here and just really be grateful for Chris James, who is the author of this. Chris is incredible, and you can hear her talk about several of the past reflections from the first round on our prior episodes. I highly recommend checking those out if you have time. And thank you, Chris, for writing those for us and writing this one in particular. Okay, so when we were thinking about this and we were kind of planning this episode, I asked you, like, what is a lens that you would want to talk about this story through? And you chose the lens of grief. And I was wondering if you could just help me understand, like, why this word. This is a huge word. It's big. It's got a lot going on, and you picked it. And so I'm curious what was going through your head, and why did you pick it?
Well, to be honest, you did give me a list of potential options, but grief was directly addressed in the short story, so it made sense to me that we could talk about this, and it's really staring us right in the face, and it's a big thing. It's what this whole story encompasses, so it made sense to me.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where I don't know if everybody who's listening knows the behind the scenes of like planning the episode, but sometimes I offer the people who are joining us to pick a lens from out of the ether, and they pick it on their own. And sometimes they're like, hey, what are some options here? I haven't done this before. And you took the latter option. And so these were some of the ones that came up. And grief is it feels like such a both under examined topic and over examined topic in our culture, that it seems like there's a lot potentially to unpack. And so I'm excited about hearing your perspective on it. And so what does it mean to you to talk about grief then? What is grief for you?
Yeah, it's something that's really hard for me to talk about, I would say, because I
Mm-hmm.
can be kind of a closed off person when it comes to like those kinds of emotions. Because I do want to be like more of a happy person all the time rather than
Yeah.
sad. But like, it's something that I know we all have to deal with eventually. We're gonna deal with, sadness and loss eventually in our lives, and some more often than others. Like we can see Zubeya has gone through it, a lot more, and Zim hasn't. You know, but I think through him, I'll say that, talk about it later, probably like she'll learn to heal a bit from it. Like, and I love that quote that you chose with it, that even though time will heal the wounds, you won't be exactly the same as before that. And so
Yeah.
I think that was a perfect summary of it. And yeah.
Yeah, learning to dance with the limp is a really provocative image for sure. Yeah, it's so fascinating for me to think about just grief generally speaking. And it's kind of funny, and I think it's been on my mind in particular because I just took a summer class on death, dying, and grief. And so this has been kind of a summer long experience kind of talking about this. And I'm excited because one of the first articles we read for the class, the first sentence was the Latin for "Here ye be dragons." And I was like, why are we reading about dragons in about when we talk about grief? And it's the space on the map that is uncharted often will used to have that on certain maps. And because the unknown is dangerous, and it is chalked up to having dragons and things along those lines. And thinking about this show in particular contextualizes dragons as not necessarily being they are dangerous, but they are not necessarily something to be feared. And I think that's an interesting metaphor for grief. Oh, so I thought that was really fascinating. Um, yeah, amazing. Cool. So with that in mind, sorry, I digressed a little bit there, but I want to toss it to you and just ask you kind of a question and go straight into the story. What is a moment in this story that where you noticed grief?
Yeah, it's very clear when Zim approaches his father's what is it called? It's the statue, his
Yeah.
corpse.
Yeah, like it's hard to determine. Like it is both,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
right. And Zubay's like, don't go over there, Zim. It's hard for her to
Yeah.
approach that part of the storm spire at the bottom of it, and of uh, Thunder's reaching out towards the top, but you know, Zim. We learn that I don't know that Zim loves him despite all the grief that comes with it, and he doesn't. It's different for him than with Subea, but for her, we see how hard it was to be at this place where so much grief was caused.
Yeah, there's so this is such a complex moment because there's Zubea's perspective, but then there's also Zim's. And I am recording, spoiler alert, I'm recording with Raquel Belmonte for episode 9 of the series for season 5. And just the parallel for Zubea in episode 9 going in the very beginning of the episode to Thunder and this statue and having this conversation. And yeah, like for some reason it just happened to be today that there's so much parallel between this and that episode that I was just like, whoa, this is so intense. But for Zim, here's what's weird about Zim. Zim is playing with his dad's bones, right? And it's in statue form, but at the same time it's like, imagine seeing a child playing with I guess a statue of their dead dad. It's such a what's the word? It's such a tough thing to witness when you know it was a tragic death. And I think that's what makes this so hard, is that this was not a death where he died a peaceful death. This was like a murder situation, which complicates grief all the more. Does that resonate with you? Is that there's a lot of things that I just lifted up there, but I'm curious if that kind of provokes any thought from you.
Like about like where Zim yeah, could you repeat that? Like kind of like where he's
I'm curious how it landed for you in particular, for Zim, this image of Zim playing in the around this structure, corpse, body, statue situation.
It's really, I think for Zim, he just doesn't understand exactly like what it was. I mean, because he's this small, tiny thing, and his dad's immense. For humans, we don't have this difference in scale that Zim will have to his father. So it's just like this giant statue there that he has to totally look up to even notice what it is, right? So to me, it's like it's not quite. It's kind of different, like, and especially since he didn't live to see his dad's death. He wasn't alive. He wasn't born yet, so he doesn't seem to understand the gravity of where he is. But like, I kind of don't blame him too much if Zubeya doesn't want to talk about it. If he just kind of landed there and was just playing around.
And I think part of my question is, where this might be a little nitpicky, but like what is the phase of development that Zim is in, for like what is the parallel equivalent of where he is developmentally around, like he's only 4 years old or 3.5 or something along those lines. But with that in mind, maybe he's, I don't know, is that right? Is that 3-ish? It's like 3.5-ish.
Well, this I think this does take place before season 4, so I don't know exactly when this, like, we see the picture of him at the end, and he looks like his like season 3 self.
Oh, I didn't
know. So at least that's what it looks like to me. He looks like young, so he's kind of in his like still kind of little puppy face.
Yeah. So
more like brooding.
Regardless, right? Yeah. Like as a dragon, we don't know the equivalent of dragon to human, and what is the parallel developmentally. And so I'm wondering, like, is this the equivalent of a 4-year-old, like, who is playing in this, or is this the equivalent of like a 10-year-old, or is this the equivalent of like a, and so it's interesting to me because Zubea is having a really hard conversation with a child. And
Yeah.
it is really interesting to think about how we talk about grief with children. Um, and I'm curious, like, if that was something that you thought about when it was like, what's it like to talk about grief with young people, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting because like Zim also really can't communicate in the way that
Mm,
Zubea can. She can understand him and she can like it's I loved how she could always tell where she is because she has the Arcanum connection. She knows about, they have a very close connection in that way that humans don't. But uh he still can't communicate in the way that she can, but she can understand him. Even
yeah,
so, maybe, he's not like a super little baby where he doesn't know how to speak words, but there is definitely some imbalance, and she can be very complex, and he can communicate one word at one meaning at a time. And
yeah.
if he understands it, is I am not like all the complexities. I'm not sure because he's just like, we know he loves his dad, but what are the complexities of that?
It's just so interesting. And I think my impression is that Zubea is not shying away from this conversation for Zim's sake, but for her own sake. She doesn't want to experience the pain of being near Avizandum. Um, but it seems like she is willing to have this conversation with Zim when she like is like putting her pain aside. Does that make sense? Like, it's interesting to me that it's not a nope, Zim, you're not ready for this conversation. Is
Yeah.
not That's not the problem. It's that it's too painful for me, right?
I think being with Zim is her way of being able to, I mean, she's finally able to talk about it. She has somebody to talk about it with. And
Yeah.
uh yeah.
Well, and I think that's exactly the point for me of this whole story is that if I were to assign like a moral, so to speak, to the story, it would be talking about grief is going to make it easier be to exist, right? It ends on this really beautiful note of the lightning flashes, and a smile, the shadow of a smile is on Avizandum's face, and like Zim is really happy, and like it's one of those things where it's like this really really tough beginning and storm leads to this like glint of hope at the end. And I it's a really neat thing to think about this story as a model perhaps for what it looks like for this experience of grief. How do we process it in a way that is healthy? And this is one potential avenue. Is that right? Does that mean that's how it feels to me?
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with you that this story is about processing grief. And yeah, I mean, it makes sense. The storm ends, and then, eventually there'll be sunshine again.
Yeah.
So I love it.
And it's interesting though, because I think it goes back to that Anne Lamott quote, even though the storm ends and you may not be in that grief, sometimes a storm will happen again, right? And you will remember, and you will, like, metaphorically speaking, the storm will happen again, and this will revisit you, and it will be hard again, and you'll have moments where it's fleeting and it's really painful, and sometimes it's not, and it's just learning to be and exist with that like metaphorical limp in a way. It's just really a beautiful experience. Oh, well, Chris James rocking it.
Yeah, this is such a beautiful story. And like personally, I just loved getting to see this side of Zubea and dragons in general in this show.
Yeah.
This was like the first time I think perhaps we really got to see their perspective, just them.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to see Zubea more in season, in the most recent season. We got to see like scenes of just her, which I also love. So I really appreciate seeing this perspective.
Yeah. I'm curious for you, just a general question, knowing that you have spent a lot of time with this show. What is your kind of you mentioned at the very beginning enjoying dragons, but also just non-humans, right? And I'm curious what it's like for you to I think the tendency for me, I'll speak from my perspective, is that it's really difficult to imagine different ways of being and existing, right? When I am so entrenched in my own way of seeing the world. And um, I'm curious for you if you think that dragons experience grief differently than humans do. And if so, what kind of clues or thoughts brought you to thinking about that? And it might be no, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I definitely think they do experience it differently in this show. Uh, what that is exactly, yeah, I'm not sure. It could change between each dragon, but yeah, I'm not really like 100% how, but I just don't think they experience things the same way do because their life is, I mean, they live so many lives.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, as in they live so long, like especially arch dragons, where a human's life is pretty inconsequential to them,
Mhm.
in the scope of things. And I think eventually, like just probably like Star Touch elves is probably similar. That's probably the closest they'll get. I think perhaps like they'll learn to not grieve as much eventually, because they've experienced it so many times. Some, especially if they were close, like Zim's gonna have to experience it eventually with all his friends.
Yeah.
That eventually it might not be as tough to get through things. That's just my thought. But it seems like for Zubeya, like uh Avazamdam was supposed to be her one that was supposed to be with her forever and ever. They had the exact same, lifespan and status. So the fact that he's gone so early, that's like that hits her probably maybe even harder than it
Yeah.
would a human because as we saw, she went into a deep depression. So I think actually it's like more intense, perhaps, because she could not function after losing Thunder.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that that's a really good point because what we see is that she was like in an almost unwakeable sleep, right? And thinking about that as an extension of a depression is helpful, I think, for contextualizing the difference. And I think, are you a fan? Have you read the Inheritance Cycle, Aragon?
I have
Um,
not.
so, well, talk about dragons
Yeah.
and dragon writing. It's there's a lot of similarities in that I'm noticing that dragons live a really long time, indefinitely, really. And so do like their elves do, but the author kind of goes into attempting to explain the differences of what it is like to live forever and experience the continual death of certain folks while you have other people that are around you, and things that mean more to someone who lives forever are like the birth of a new person with that lives forever is like, oh, this is a really big deal. Like it is way bigger deal than it seems like we make of it. And it's the same deal with death, right? It's those things are taken more seriously and they're more intensely honored. And I'm wondering if there's something that we can learn from that, learning perhaps to appreciate, even though we aren't living forever, learning still to appreciate the brevity and gravity of of life. I don't know. That's my thought. That's what I'm feeling called to do, is to perhaps just appreciate it and be more intentional about it.
Yeah, for people that, I mean, since for all us humans, yeah, we should like just appreciating because we're all the same, we don't
Mhm.
have dragons in our real world that live forever, that we need to appreciate each life more, uh seeing, all these people dying, but some people don't really think about it, all these people dying, but maybe we should, like, more. I think if, there's, even though there is, like, we might live countries apart, uh or things like that. I don't know. I'm just trying to think, like, because it was just like still to dragons, we in this story that, so, he may have gotten a little too carried away with his job and killed a
Yeah.
bunch of humans. So to him, those lives were inconsequential, uh, but for us, they're not. So yeah, I don't know.
It's interesting. There's a moment in this that I appreciate in regards to this, and one of them is Zubeia feels like this is painful, right? And so I think the first thing is that we see a very intense description right at the very beginning of how grief is physically experienced. Like, she talks about it being like a physical pain in her chest, like a shard of glass. And I think often we forget that this is something that we experience in our body. It's not just it's not just a feeling in our head. It's a physical feeling. Um, and I thought that was really fascinating because when I'm in pain, I am not very likely to want to uh, do things that are good for other people. Like, when I'm in pain, I am very like tunnel vision focused on that pain, and I'm less likely to be helpful or to want to, perhaps, like, if I had a kid, I would probably be less patient with my child if I were in pain. And we see that initially with Zubeia in this. And I guess I'm wondering if it seems like grief has the potential to make compassion more difficult, is, I think, my point. Um, has that been an experience for you? Does that resonate with you, or is that off the wall?
No, I agree. Like, not only with the story, but yeah, in real life, it's like sometimes all you like when you're really upset, all you can think about is yourself, right? So, and just trying to, live, continue on, or, hopefully get over it before you can think about other people. So, no, I totally get where you're coming from.
Yeah, it's so wild to think about because it's counterintuitive, right? Because what we really need when we're in pain from grief is community, but what that grief is doing is, in a way, shutting us down from getting that community, because it's saying, no, 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 you need to go process alone. Because I think that's something that's cultural, especially for in the United States. Like, oh, you're crying, you should go be by yourself. You need to go alone and be by yourself. When really what we want is like, no, I want to be like comforted, right? I want to experience community. And I don't know, it feels counterintuitive, and I don't know how we what are your thoughts on how we counteract that?
Well, I mean, Zubei is so lucky to have Zim because
Yeah.
she gets to see, he can kind of see past that and, see the light at the end of the tunnel there for her.
Yeah.
And she has, like, that's her hope. And so she always has him to say there's someone else, there's someone that could help me. And he sees the bright he's just a child, so he sees a lot of things
Mm-hmm.
uh positively. And yeah, I think it is always important, like maybe when you're comfortable, to find your community, if either it could be in person or online, to reach out to somebody to talk about things with.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be hard to just get over it entirely alone without speaking to anyone, or it will last longer if you just bottle it up.
Mm-hmm. Well, and we see that, right, in the show, in that Zubeia retreated, right? And she was literally to the point of sleeping, that people were worried for her health. Um, and that retreat was detrimental to her experience. And then Zim, right? And like, I think that I don't mean to say that everybody should have a child when you are experiencing grief. I don't think that's the answer. But it is interesting to think about how one of the things I think about is a social wound requires a social balm in order to heal. That's a quote from Brene Brown that I heard. And I think that's so true because I think grief is often our surrounding loss, for loss of someone, loss of people that we love and care about. And that's a social wound. And I think it indicates that means that there's a social way to heal. And I think we see that in this. Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
What else in this is sparking interest for you that we haven't talked about yet? I think I only have one more that is on my mind.
Um, well, I mean, I really loved them in the beginning of seeing what Zubea thinks of Rex Igneous. Just it's good to I like seeing what the relationships are between the dragons, and we got a little glimpse at that. Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure we'll keep seeing that in the show, and I love it.
It's interesting to think about too, like in that dream sequence, it's so cool that she is dreaming about being comforted by a friend, right? And like that when Rex said that stuck with her, and that was comforting for her, and she is remembering that and experiencing that through this dream. Or maybe it's not a memory, maybe it's something that she's dreaming and it's just conjuring up. Who knows? What do you think? Do you think it's a memory, or do you think it's a dream sequence that may or may not have happened?
I mean, I want to say it's a bit of both. He probably
Yeah.
has said some of this to her in the past, although like this is a unique circumstance that they haven't talked in a while, I'm pretty sure. So back when in the day when, Rex didn't even know Thunder died. So
Yeah.
back in the day, it seemed like Rex did think highly of Zubea. So he probably did call her the Mighty Queen and all that, and knew that she's strong.
Yeah. Fascinating. No, I think that's really cool. I would love to get more arch dragon interaction. That seems like a really cool thing for us to see. I would have loved to have seen more of Domina Profundus as well in season 5.
Right. I loved the stories we got for her that expanded a lot on what we
Yes,
know. So
exactly.
keep them coming.
I am all about these stories. It's so cool. So my last point is about the relationship between bravery and grief. And again, I think this is kind of towards the end of the story where she's like, no, I have to be brave for Zim, and I'm gonna talk about these feelings. I'm gonna become proximate to this grief. And that in and of itself, she is labeling as an act of bravery. And I'm curious if that's how you think about grief as well. Is it brave to opt in to feeling the feelings of grief?
I think, yeah, I mean, it can be so scary to even, I don't know, approach anyone about your grief or do anything about it. It's strong to do these things. I mean, I agree with you. It's just, yeah, I'm not sure exactly what to say here, but
No, I think that's it's I don't know that there is the right thing to say,
yeah.
other than it's really interesting to me though that I think what happens is the stories we tell ourselves are often like, I'm so weak because I'm so like depressed, and I'm so filled with grief, and I am so this is affecting me so much, and I'm feeling these feelings, and therefore I'm weak in ourselves. But then what we see Zubea doing is demonstrating that that's not the case. It's when we feel those feelings, that's an act of bravery, not an act of weakness. And so it just seems so counterintuitive, I think, for people. And I guess I'm wondering this seems like a healthier option, I think is my point, is that Zubeia is showing us that I think from her history of living for, forever, is showing us that bravery is a better choice than thinking that it's a sign of weakness to feel that grief, right? Does that make sense? Is that or am I just talking out?
Like, no, it's pretty amazing. Like, even though she's lived for so long, I feel like over the course of the series so far, she has grown so much versus, we saw her at the beginning of the series wallowing in her grief versus, she was feeling that, but she was cutting everyone off. She wasn't letting anyone get close to her. She wasn't waking up versus now, she's brave enough to talk about it with Zim, and I think she's growing from it. And so I think this is the right thing for her to do. And
Yeah.
I'm grateful for that.
And I think that's another, like, I guess, call to courage for everyone who's kind of still listening to us have this conversation. But it's a, like, what does it mean when we're feeling grief? It seems like we're being called to feel those feelings, and that is I would like to say that we should call that an act of bravery, not an act of weakness. Right? That is a sign you are living your best life, is that you choose and opt into the feeling rather than to shy away from it, I guess, if that makes sense. Ooh, man.
Yes, this is a little tough for me, but
it's a tough subject.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So is there anything else that we want to touch on before we transition over to our next and final segment?
No, I think you covered a lot of it, which was amazing. It's not the longest story, but like I just loved every moment of it. Oh, it gave me very Lion King vibes, how Zubeia was like,
Yeah,
he lives in, like, fandom lives in you. Yeah, I know, right? That's I was like, oh, I love Lion King also because non-humans, but it's just to see how, Sim's like his father, but he's also somebody else, and I can't wait to see him grow.
oh God, what a beautiful song too, just like shouting. Right? God, that soundtrack, one of the greatest in the history of ever. Oh man. Okay, well, this has been incredible so far. Thank you for having this intense conversation with me. I want to love to invite us into gratitude, thinking about something from this conversation. Who is someone from this story or from our conversation that you are thankful for, and why?
Yeah, in the story there are really only like 3 named characters, I think. But obviously, I'm just super thankful for Zim for being there, his lovely self, and bringing out some light in Zubeia that she probably didn't know she had still. And reminding her that, yeah, we still love Thunder even though he is gone.
Yeah, I'm really grateful for that too. Like, grateful just for the childlike, and I guess it's not childlike, it is the child that is giving us a chance to remember that we need to explain things, and some things are not just evidenced by, or obvious, I guess. Amazing. So Zim, and I think I'm gonna have to take the obvious choice here and pick Zubeia for choosing that brave option and choosing to have this conversation with Zim that is clearly difficult for her, but I'm really grateful that she's modeling what it looks like to handle grief well for Zim. And I think that that's just really beautiful. And so I'm grateful for that as well.
Awesome. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, that brings us to our closing, which I would love for you to, if you want to be found, how would you like to be found by our listeners?
Yeah. So yeah, like I mentioned, I do have a YouTube channel. It's Cartoon Universe on YouTube. And if you still use Twitter, we do have a Twitter, whatever it's called now. Not going to mention it. It's at Cartoon UV. And we have the same handle on Instagram. Oh, and we also have a Discord. The code to get in is cartoon UV as well. It's just a direct code to get in. And I'm also a moderator on the official Dragon Prince Discord. So if you want to talk just Dragon Prince, that's the place to be.
Sweet. I highly recommend checking out all of those things. Please do. If you want to find us, if you want to find me and have a conversation, you can find me at bnb_pod. And that's on pretty much all of the social medias. You can find me also and support us on Patreon, bnb_pod. We really appreciate that. We're really trying to help give our producer just a little bit more than he's getting right now. And so if you could help us do that right now, we're at 8 people who are on our campaign. I'd love to get to 10 as our next goal. So I really would love that. And if you have any capacity, if you're the type of person that listens to this the day it comes out, this might be for you to consider. But no matter what, I understand that it's a tough life that we live, and if you can't contribute financially, that is perfectly okay. Listening is enough. I hope that everyone is doing well. Hailey, thank you so much for being a guest on the show. And I look forward to seeing you on all of the interwebs.
Yeah, thank you once again for letting me be a guest on here. You've had a lot of amazing guests, so I'm glad I could join the ranks.
Yes, it is incredible to have you among them. All right, everyone. With that in mind, thanks for listening. This has been another episode of Bending Not Breaking in the Dragon Pod. Until next time, be well and do good.